We will close the day with a panel that discuss with such a big backdrop of change, hyper change, and to all the experience that we see in the local context. Let's zoom out a little bit. With the two close partners here, perhaps some of you have heard of their work in some of the local experimentation sharing already, but I would like to take the first question to you guys. Just briefly introduce about your work, why you're doing so, and what are the problems that you are targeting. And yeah, so maybe we'll have Tom first, and then we'll have Ike.
Thank you, Marco, and thank you so much for having me here this afternoon. It's been such a joy over the last 4 days. I think I've been in Hong Kong since Tuesday, to meet so many incredible teachers and leaders and funders and supporters of the work of Ednovators. So thank you first off for having me here today. I run an organization called Skills Builder Partnership, and I set that organization up 16 years ago when I was still a secondary school teacher in London. And what I was finding with my learners was that we were spending so much time thinking about the final exam and the final qualification, and yet, to Valerie's point earlier, we knew that loads of our learners were not going to be well set up for the rest of their lives, either because they would struggle to get the qualification, or even if they got the qualification, that wasn't enough to go on and be successful. So at Skills Builder Partnership, we focus on building what we call essential skills or transferable skills. So communication, collaboration skills, self-management skills, and creative problem-solving skills. And we think that those are really fundamental if young people are going to be able to use the knowledge that they've built through their time in education to be successful in the future. Now, what we realized was that there aren't a shortage of teachers who think that this is important. Actually, this is something as teachers or as parents or as just people ourselves, we know that these skills really matter. The problem is, how do you manage to break those skills down in such a way that they can actually be taught and measured, and that we can help young people and children to understand their skill set and be able to use it in the rest of their lives? And so we developed a model called the Universal Framework, which is all about breaking those very big skills down into small steps, 16 steps for each skill, with the idea that rather than trying to teach the whole of teamwork in one go, we could teach how to resolve disagreements in a group, or we could teach how to share tasks effectively between people. And so the idea is, by breaking these things down, we start being able to tackle them and teach them step by step. We've been running, as I said, in the UK now for, with the Universal Framework for 8 years. It's been wonderful to work with Ednovators and colleagues, some of whom I hope you met through the first groups, A and B, in the first set of talks. We're talking about the work they were doing with Skills Builder, and they're having an incredible impact because of the hard work that those teachers and the team at Ednovators are putting in for their learners. So thank you for having me.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Ike, what does HoloTracker do?
Right, so my name is Ike. I'm from Singapore. About 6 years ago, I met a team of really brilliant learning architects. These were people who were running and founded some of the largest international schools around the world, heads of student development and some engineers. And it was really interesting because they were trying to fix this problem that I think we have talked about so much today, which is that how do we transform the ways that we see our students' report card or see our students' progress? And the reason why they wanted to solve that problem was exactly that we are talking about so much of these skills, we're talking about so much of these experiences, but where does that go in how we show feedback to our children? Our children have 4 million plus feedback points by the time they're 18. Every time they see, they try something, they look at the adult's eyes and they go, have I done well? Right? Every time they do a new skill, they go, oh, am I doing this in a better way than I did before? But how much of this feedback actually goes into what we tell our students how they're growing? How does it shape their sense of self, their sense of purpose and that sense of possibility. So HoloTracker is really a tool that solves that problem, right? It allows us to say that these skills are observable skills, that these are seen by a human eye, not by AI, not by a camera looking at the classroom, but something that you recognize and you feel joy when a child builds that Lego piece for the first time, when they solve a math problem after 8 tries, and you feel so proud of them. And if you can recognize these moments and observe them, and allow our students to also grow that skill of observation, it builds that language, that lens around how you see the whole child. So it's a tool that we built 6 years ago. Today it's in something like 20% of Singaporean public schools. We're in 10 different countries. I just came back from Ukraine, so we have some schools in Ukraine that we're supporting in terms of a war. And actually, recently, the National Institute of Education in Singapore Teaching College has implemented the tool to teach teachers how to observe social-emotional skills. So it's a fun journey. I hope to share a little bit more, but that's me and my work.
Cool, thank you. So both Tom and Nick are working on a platform and a framework that is universal and scalable, I would say, to most of the schools. So when we talk about like the future of learning, the future of education, and often that we work with teachers, and we ask teachers, okay, what can we do? So you both of you gave them something, like a framework to work on, a platform to play with, I would say. So when we talk about innovation in schools, so what kind of conditions do you think that allow these innovation sticks in the system, or in one school, or in a pilot? So do you have any experience that from your framework embedding into different schools, what are the conditions that make innovation sticks? Because we have all done some amazing experimentations. So can you share a little bit of what you observed from around the world?
I'll lead off. Yeah, I think there are some really clear conditions that I've seen where programs like Skills Builder have really worked and stuck. I think the first thing is always to think about what the goal is. And I think that's really important because I think there are tools and there are all sorts of different activities that we can all do, and we can do that as teachers or in our wider lives. But it's all about what the purpose, what the goal is of what we're trying to achieve. And where I see teachers being really effective in trying and using something like Skills Builder effectively, they start with the goal that they want to build the essential skills of their learners. So they know what they're trying to achieve, they know what success looks like, and they feel motivated by wanting to achieve that success. And I think that's so important because you've got to have that thing you're aiming for. And then what you can then try is actually just getting started. So I think too often, we don't innovate because we wait for everything to be perfect. We wait for everything to be lined up, for us to have a space, for it to be exactly the right timing, the right resources. And the reality is that often that's just making excuses for not really doing something. So having that getting started, trying it out, and I think being willing for some things not to work, I think is really important in innovation. Because some things won't work. And it's been fascinating, as I said, meeting the Hong Kong schools doing Skills Builder, because some of the things that we thought would work or work in the UK, it's different. And that's very normal, that it won't all work in the same way that you expect, and adaptation is really important, and changing is really important. And so having that openness to testing, to reviewing whether it works, and then to try again, I think is really key. But I think the leap from something happening in a classroom is then how do you expand that? So how do you bring other people on board as well? So do you show and share some of what you've been doing, as some of the teachers have been doing this afternoon? Do you do that with your colleagues? Do you make sure that your principal is aware of what's going on? Maybe not at the very beginning when you're not sure if it's going to work, but as it starts to work, then that's a good time to start sharing it and bringing other people on board as well. And what I've found in my experience in the UK, but also with other countries, is often these initiatives start small, and it's started by a teacher or a small number of teachers who really believe in the goal, who are really passionate about the outcome for their learners, who try it out and are the brave ones who take the biggest risk at the beginning. but then are the ones who are willing to communicate and share it and start bringing other people along too and being open about what works and what they've learned on the way. And that, for me, is how innovation really starts.
Yeah, I think we need to radically narrow the distance between what we say and what we do. I think we say a lot in education innovation. We are always trying to show the projects that we're doing, but I've also seen schools where we are having this big reform, and the thing that the teachers need to do is to stand, or sit rather, in front of the computer and justify how they are showing this innovation. And I think that can be the most crushing feeling for many teachers and many students when what we say is not what we do. So I think I'll share an experience. So I work a lot with also schools for special education needs in Singapore. And this school that I'm about to talk about is the School for Cerebral Palsy. So without knowing the technical details, it's a condition that affects a child most of the time from birth. And it also affects the ways that they move or the ways they cognitively process things. So when we first entered the school was in this big ministry transformation of inculcating values and skills into the curriculum. And they have things like confidence, respect, integrity, typical school values that you might see in any part of the world. And the teachers go, if my child can't even pick up a spoon by themselves, how are they supposed to show confidence? And I think when we start at that point where we say that we need to fulfill these things, we get very stressed. We try our best and work doubly hard to show and justify that work so that we can get funding, so that we can get further support from our teachers and principals. When they started to use the tool HoloTracker, and it's really observation-based, they started to go, one of the lead teachers said in a training session, if the child tries to pick up a spoon to eat by themselves, is that not a show of confidence? Is that not a show of resilience? And you start where the child is, right? And if you focus daily work on just the small things that matter, and Skills Builder, we have all the skills that we have, but we really see in context how each child shows it differently, and we respect that. I think people will have a much better time. So to answer your question on how innovation spreads, I think when we are able to show teachers and students and parents that these are not airy-fairy ideas that happen 10 years later. It happens now. It really gives them that momentum to move forward. And of course, starting somewhere, anywhere is really important as well.
Thank you for the sharing. I would love to invite questions from the floor also. So that's why you'll see the QR code that you saw just now a few hours ago. So you can key in your questions, and I'll be able to look at it on my iPad. So you can, just ask anything you want, and I'll try to summarize and direct to the two panelists. Meanwhile, I'll shoot another questions. So I guess most of us here are educators. And I would like to bring the focus on learners. So with your work in the UK or different parts of the world in Singapore, how do you think, or what are you observing the learner's role in the innovation process? Anything specific that you want to share on how do we involve learners in the process? Maybe Ike first.
Yeah, I always like to tell audiences, our learners are also seeing, and our learners are also perceiving all the time. I met schools where they go, oh, we need to design the occasions for them to show learning. But what about the times they're playing in the playground? What are the times they're playing in the field? They're also learning creativity, collaboration, and can we make that visible? So coming back to learners, I think it's really respecting that learners have that agency and that voice. And when you start with that foundation, everything else is very easy. You can't create a new project-based learning class. It's not about yes, it is the learning design and the task and the mission and all that, yes. But also you have 6, 7, 8, 20, 40 lives in front of you who are trying to make friends with their partner, trying to make sense of what they're learning. And if we respect that they have that agency, we change the way that we give instruction, we change the way that we create policy, we change the way that we see our learners, and I think that's very important. Yeah.
I think that point about agency is really critical, and I think that's one theme that's come up a lot over the course of this afternoon is is that opportunity for involving individual learners. And when I think about essential skills, ultimately, the skills belong to the learners. They are the learners' skills. So we need to demystify for the learners what that skill set looks like for them, which is why when we work with schools, we encourage the teacher to share the framework. The framework is not just a secret for the teacher. It is not meant to be a sort of a black box that the learners don't understand what's going on and they just get a score out the other end. That's completely wrong. And King was showing some fantastic examples earlier about getting the learners to self-reflect, getting them to think, you know, where am I at the moment? What evidence do I have? But also, therefore, what is the next step? And I was having a really useful conversation with the principal earlier as well, where we were talking about part of having that transparency and that clarity for individuals is that they not only understand where they are, but they can understand what the next thing to do is. And that's really motivating, actually. Whereas if you were just waiting to be told what the next thing was to do, the motivation isn't there. So I think the more you can give that information and understanding and insight, and therefore the power to act to learners, I think you get a really good result as a result.
I'll just quickly add, I had a story from a teacher in Singapore, and he had this revelation one day. He came to me and he said, "Ik, for all this time we think about how we want to give feedback to our children. Have we ever asked them what kind of feedback they want to receive?" And I found it the most simple but big revelation, because after that he started going, every time I give an assignment, and it doesn't matter, it doesn't need to be just character skills, he teaches physics, right? What kind of feedback do you want to get out of your assignment? And I think when you give them that ability to articulate, then you really empower learning as well. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. There are quite a number of questions, so I'll try to summarize it. So to both speakers, because we're working, you are using a framework. Tom is using a universal framework, working with teachers, implementing in schools, and also impact organizations and employers. Ik is using a platform to facilitate micro-observation to happen. So what has been the most challenging mindset? Because we work with educators, and of course we're all converted here, but we are working with those who are not yet. So what's one challenging mindset you have been working on, or you have to address, and how did you overcome the resistance from those who don't want to change, or to achieve the shift that we want to see? So yeah, any insights?
Yeah, I'm glad to lead off. So particularly with essential skills. So again, we're talking about collaboration, we're talking about leadership, communication skills. I think there are two big things, if you don't mind me having a second one. I think the first is the idea that you can teach these things rigorously. So one of the things that I think Valerie made the point earlier about was examinations are not actually very good. They're not actually very robust. They only capture a very small part of what an education really is. And yet we seem to imagine that they are perfect, and that if you do well in examinations, then you've had a great education. The problem then is that if you believe that, then you think that anything that you don't examine, therefore, isn't real education. And so one of the problems we've had, or one of the mindsets we've had to change about essential skills, is that you can teach these as rigorously and effectively as any other more academic learning. And you can have the same sort of expectations around supporting learners to make progress. You can measure outcomes in the same ways. You can measure outcomes as rigorously, not using the examination method, although you can test some of the underpinning knowledge, but also through observation, through the building of portfolios, through projects. And I think all of these are very valid things. So I think that's the first mindset shift. The second mindset shift we had to move was the troubling idea that those skills are innate, by which I mean they're natural. You're either born with them or you're not born with them. And I find that very troubling, because we talk too easily about natural leaders, natural communicators, And we seem to forget sometimes that what we're therefore presuming is that most learners can't do it. And so I think one of the things that I think is most important about the universal framework is that by demystifying what skills look like, you can say you're here today, but look, this is the next step. This is what you need to work on in order to make that next step. It's not a mystery anymore. It's really clear that with the right teaching and with the right practice, you can make that step. So I think those are two really, really important mindset shifts.
For me, I think the biggest mindset shift is that we rely so much on the best learners when we design our systems. We think, for example, that when we give a social emotional skills survey that everybody knows what the survey means because 10% of the population can articulate well. We design exams in a way that assumes that the learners are able to apply themselves as they do these exams, that they sit in a 2-hour session and all they're doing is applying themselves, when actually they're also thinking about the problems at home, the conflicts with their friends and all that in that same moment. So I think the biggest mindset shift that I've had to work with in schools is to be simply honest and present with the process, to not always say, oh, we need to reach that step in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. Yes, it's good to have a direction that we want to go to, but be honest about where we are today. If we are not ready, then don't say that we are, shaping the future of education. You don't have to, right? And I think if we take the small steps with our schools, we recognize that they are having the real challenges today, and for teachers to also be okay with knowing that these are real challenges.
One question is on observation and giving feedback also. So I guess there are the person who asked this is having a hard time. This is how he or she frame it. So if a teacher are not a very good listeners, observers, reflective enough, so how can they give good feedback? So and I'm sure this is something real also. So how would, in your work, how did you work with educators with diverse abilities in mobilizing them to do this kind of innovation and embedding work?
Not everybody that plays sports is a sportsman. Not everybody that goes to the gym is a bodybuilder. And I think it's the same kind of feedback. And when we say feedback, it's not about the charismatic things that we say. It's that tangible feedback loop. Every time you do something, I respond and show you that I've seen you do something. I might not know that it's a certain skill that you can build in that moment, but I recognize that you have done something. The same way, you go to the gym and you have little steps that you take, and you want to challenge yourself to grow in doing the exercises. It's the same for teachers and feedback. You start off with a simple principle, observe, right, and the way that the tool works, and this is not the only way, but the way that our tool works is that every time you observe, the chart is live, right? So after 8 weeks of observations, you might see, hey, I've never seen collaboration in a classroom, and I might start asking myself, do I know what collaboration in a classroom means? So I think being able to make observations and feedback tactile, it is an art, it is a delivery, but it's also the way of seeing and collecting the data points as well. Yeah.
Anything to add?
Not much to add. I mean, I just think one of the things that's really clever about the HoloTracker approach is that we all of us as humans sink so quickly back into our existing expectations and biases about what we're expecting to see. And I think you need those little nudges sometimes of, almost to be prompted, what are you really seeing? What are you really observing? Have you really spent much time thinking about this particular student because they're quiet versus some of the students who maybe take up more time or take up more space in the classroom? And just because they're quieter, are you therefore assuming a whole load of things about them that actually aren't true? So I think we all need those little nudges actually to keep ourselves thoughtful and honest about what we're really observing in our learners.
Cool. I saw signs that we don't have much time left. So I think what we have been talking here is really about personalizing how we teach and how we design learning experience for our learners today. And how do we prepare them and empower them? And without much biases, or at least we need to service or acknowledge that as adults, we do have biases. And how can we, fix it or try to navigate this? So last questions, because we have been hearing a lot today, so I want to ask, if you were to, if we were each to take one courageous step tomorrow, what would that look like? What would you advise or share or encourage everyone to do?
So I can share the one I'm going to take.
Okay.
I think that's a really good challenge to all of us, I think, is to think about what's that one thing that we're going to actually do as a result of the fantastic afternoon that we've had here today. I think the thing that I'm going to do is to talk more explicitly about what I think a good education should look like, and I think to challenge the implicit notion that Valerie was talking about of what our education system is, and to actually challenge that out loud in perhaps a way that I haven't done so much before. So that's my action anyway.
Ake?
One big action is a bit difficult. I think that one big action is that I really hope that every teacher realizes that what they are doing intuitively is actually not wrong. Everyone knows that before we learn to read and write and nowadays code, that we need to be resilient, that we need to persevere with the process, that we need to feel emotionally safe. Every teacher knows that. No teacher wants to go into the classroom and fight their child. So I think if we can take a step to show teachers that they already know these things, that these so-called new skills and new paradigms that we're talking about is already happening in the small, intuitive things that they're doing, I think the world of teaching will be very different.
Oh, thank you.